This happened about 5 years ago, back when I was working the graveyard shift at an all-night diner. It was one of those greasy spoons right off the interstate, the kind of place where truckers and weary travelers would stop for a mediocre cup of coffee and a stale donut. I was saving up for college, and the hours were brutal, but the tips were decent, and it was usually dead quiet after 2 a.m. Most nights it was just me, the cook, and the hum of the old fluorescent lights. We had this regular, a guy named Jerry. He was an older man, always wore a faded baseball cap and a worn-out denim jacket, and he'd come in every night around 3:30 a.m. Ordered the same thing, black coffee and a slice of apple pie. Never said much, just ate his pie, drank his coffee, and left a $2 tip on a $5 check. He was harmless, a part of the background noise of the night shift. One Tuesday night, I was wiping down the counter, half asleep on my feet, when Jerry walked in. But something was off. He looked agitated. His eyes darted around the empty diner, and he kept fiddling with the brim of his cap. He ordered his usual, but instead of sitting at his regular booth by the window, he chose a stool at the far end of the counter, almost hidden by the pastry display. I poured his coffee and set it down, along with his pie. He didn't even look at it. He just stared at the front door. "Everything all right, Jerry?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He flinched, then slowly turned his head to face me. His eyes were wide, and he looked genuinely scared. He opened his mouth to say something, then closed it, shaking his head. He took a sip of his coffee, still not touching his pie. A few minutes later, he pushed the pie away, stood up, and started walking towards the door. "You forgot your pie, Jerry," I called out. He stopped, his hand on the door handle, and without turning around, he said in a low, shaky voice, "Keep it. And you should too, kid. Get out of here." Then he was gone, just like that. I stood there, bewildered, staring at the untouched pie. It wasn't like Jerry to leave his food. And his warning, it gave me a strange cold feeling in my stomach. I went back to wiping the counter, trying to shake off the weird encounter. 10 minutes later, the front door chimed again. I looked up, expecting to see Jerry, maybe having forgotten something. But it wasn't him. It was a man I'd never seen before, tall and thin, wearing a dark trench coat despite the warm summer night. His eyes were hidden by the shadow of his hat, and he carried a briefcase. He walked straight to the counter and sat in the booth where Jerry usually sat. Not the counter stool, but Jerry's booth. He didn't say anything, just stared at me. "Can I get you something?" I asked, a little unnerved by his silence. He just slowly shook his head. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a small framed photo. He slid it across the counter towards me. It was a picture of Jerry. "You know this man?" he asked, his voice low and raspy. I hesitated. Jerry's warning echoed in my mind. I think I've seen him around," I stammered. "He's a regular." The man leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "He owes me something. Something very important." I didn't know what to say. My heart was pounding. This felt wrong. I looked at the photo again, then back at the man, trying to see his eyes, but they remained hidden. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to sound firm, but my voice wavered. He slowly pushed the photo back towards him, then stood up. He left a crisp $100 bill on the counter. "If you see him again," he said, his voice flat, "tell him I'm looking for him. Tell him it's urgent." He turned and walked out of the diner, disappearing into the night. I stood there, clutching the $100 bill, my mind racing. Who was that man? What did Jerry owe him? And what was so urgent? The rest of my shift was a blur. I kept looking out the window, half expecting the man in the trench coat to reappear, or for Jerry to come back and explain. Neither happened. When my relief finally arrived at dawn, I was a wreck. I told my manager what happened, but he just shrugged it off, saying it was probably some old debt Jerry owed. But it didn't feel like that. It felt like something far more sinister. I never saw Jerry again after that night. He just vanished. The man in the trench coat never came back either. To this day, I still wonder what happened to Jerry and what he was running from. And I often think about that untouched apple pie and Jerry's chilling words, "Get out of here." Sometimes I wonder if he saved me from something truly terrible. I'm 35 now, and this happened just a few years ago. My wife and I had just bought our first home, a charming but slightly dilapidated Victorian house on the outskirts of town. It had character, creaky floorboards, and a sprawling backyard that we dreamed of transforming into a garden oasis. We were thrilled, pouring all our savings and free time into renovations. We were doing most of the work ourselves, learning as we went. It was exhausting but exhilarating, and we felt a deep connection to every nail and paint stroke. The house had a strange feature, a small, padlocked door in the back of an old pantry. We assumed it was just a forgotten storage space, maybe an old root cellar. We decided to leave it for last, focusing on the more visible parts of the house. We'd occasionally joke about what might be behind it, half-heartedly speculating about forgotten treasures or dusty relics. We were so naive. One evening, after a particularly long day of stripping wallpaper, we finally got around to that door. The padlock was rusty and old, easily broken with a pair of bolt cutters. We pulled the door open, a cloud of musty air greeting us. It wasn't a cellar, but a narrow, unlit passage that seemed to stretch into darkness. Curiosity and perhaps a touch of fatigue got the better of us. We grabbed our flashlights and ventured in. The passage was cramped and damp, the air thick with the smell of earth and something else, something metallic and vaguely sweet. We walked for what felt like several minutes, the beam of our flashlights bouncing off rough-hewn walls. Suddenly, the passage opened into a small circular room. It was bare, save for a single wooden chair in the center. On the floor around the chair were what looked like intricate, faded drawings, almost like symbols or a strange language. A chill ran down my spine. My wife, always the braver one, knelt to examine the drawings. "What do you think these are?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. As she touched one of the symbols, a low, guttural hum began to emanate from the walls themselves. It vibrated through the floor, rising in intensity. We exchanged a terrified glance, and before we could react, the single light bulb hanging from the ceiling flickered on, illuminating the room in a sickly yellow glow. The hum intensified, and the symbols on the floor seemed to pulse with a faint, reddish light. Then, from behind the chair, a figure slowly began to emerge. It was gaunt and tall, with limbs that seemed unnaturally long. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and its eyes, deep-set and hollow, stared directly at us. It wasn't moving, just standing there, observing us with an unnerving stillness. My wife screamed, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the humming. I grabbed her arm, pulling her back towards the passage. We stumbled backwards, our flashlights clattering to the floor. The figure remained motionless, but its gaze followed us, a silent, predatory focus. We scrambled back through the narrow passage, the hum growing louder, the air feeling heavy and oppressive. We burst out of the pantry, slamming the old door shut behind us. We didn't bother with the padlock. We just threw a heavy dresser in front of it. We stood there, panting, adrenaline coursing through our veins. The silence in the house after the humming was deafening. We couldn't speak, couldn't even look at each other. The fear was a tangible thing, a suffocating presence. The next few hours were a blur of panicked phone calls and frantic research. We tried to make sense of what we'd seen, but there was no logical explanation. We called a local historian, hoping for some insight into the house's past. She mentioned rumors of a reclusive former owner, a man known for his eccentric beliefs and strange experiments. She didn't have details, just vague whispers. We couldn't stay in the house that night. We packed a bag and drove to a hotel, neither of us getting much sleep. The image of those hollow eyes, that silent figure, was burned into our minds. The next morning, we returned to the house, armed with a newfound resolve. We were not going to let this thing drive us from our home. We contacted a contractor, explaining the situation as vaguely as possible, saying we'd discovered a hidden structural issue. We had the entire pantry and the passage beyond it demolished and filled with concrete. It cost us a fortune, and our dream garden would have to wait. But the sense of relief when the last of the concrete was poured was immense. We still live in that house. We've tried to put the experience behind us, to convince ourselves it was a trick of the light, an overactive imagination, anything but what we truly believe it was. But sometimes, when the house is quiet at night and the wind whistles through the old eaves, I swear I can still hear a faint, low hum just at the edge of hearing. It's a reminder that some doors are better left unopened. I grew up in a small town nestled right against the edge of a vast, ancient forest. Everyone called it the Whispering Woods, not because of any spooky legends, but because the wind always seemed to rustle through the leaves with a soft, constant murmur, like secrets being shared just out of earshot. For me, it was never a place of fear, but a sanctuary, my escape. I knew its winding paths and hidden clearings better than the back of my hand. My best friend, Liam, was my constant companion on these woodland adventures. He was a year older, a bit more daring, always pushing us to explore deeper, to find new trails, to see what lay beyond the next ridge. We spent countless afternoons there, building forts, tracking imaginary beasts, and simply losing ourselves in the quiet embrace of the trees. Summer was always our favorite time. The canopy was thick, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor, and the air was alive with the hum of insects and the distant calls of birds. It felt like our own private world, untouched by the mundane realities of school or chores. One particular summer evening, as dusk began to settle, Liam suggested we try something new. "Let's stay out late tonight," he whispered, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Just past the old oak, there's a clearing I've never seen at night. Imagine the stars through the branches." I hesitated. My parents were strict about being home before dark, but the allure of the unknown, coupled with Liam's infectious enthusiasm, was too strong to resist. We promised each other we'd be back before midnight, a secret pact sealed with a shared grin. We packed a couple of flashlights, some granola bars, and a thermos of lukewarm lemonade. As we ventured deeper, the familiar woods began to transform. The vibrant greens of daytime softened into muted grays and deep indigos. The sounds of the forest grew sharper, more distinct. The rustle of leaves underfoot, the snap of a twig, the hoot of an owl. It wasn't scary, not yet. It was just different, more intimate, as if the woods were settling down for the night, inviting us to share its nocturnal peace. We reached the clearing Liam had mentioned. It was a small, circular space, ringed by tall, ancient pines. Above us, the sky was a canvas of deepening blue, already pricked with the first few stars. We laid out our old picnic blanket, shared the lemonade, and just lay there, gazing up. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of pine needles and damp earth. We talked about everything and nothing, school, our dreams, silly jokes. It was one of those perfect moments that felt suspended in time, a memory you know you'll hold on to forever. At one point, Liam nudged me. "Look," he whispered, pointing towards the edge of the clearing. "Did you see that?" I followed his gaze but saw nothing. "What?" "Just a flicker," he said, his brow furrowed slightly. "Thought I saw something move, like a shadow just beyond those trees." We both stared for a moment, but the darkness was too deep, the trees too dense. "Probably just a deer," I mumbled, trying to sound nonchalant, though a tiny prickle of unease had started to form. We went back to stargazing, but the conversation felt a little less carefree. A subtle tension had entered the air. Liam kept glancing towards the tree line, his flashlight beam occasionally cutting through the darkness, sweeping across the undergrowth. I tried to shake off the feeling, attributing it to the late hour and the quiet solitude. Then Liam spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "Hey," he said, "I'm going to check something out." Just for a second. I swear I saw something. Before I could protest, he was on his feet, flashlight in hand, moving towards the spot he'd been staring at. "Liam, wait!" I called out, my voice sounding thin in the vast quiet of the woods. He didn't respond, just melted into the shadows between the trees. I sat up, my heart beginning to pound. It wasn't like Liam to just wander off without waiting for me. I listened, straining to hear any sound. His footsteps, the rustle of leaves, anything. But there was nothing. Only the incessant, soft murmur of the wind through the trees. The whispering. Minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity. The silence grew heavy, pressing in on me. The comfortable darkness of the woods now felt oppressive, menacing. The stars above, which had seemed so welcoming just moments before, now felt distant, cold, like pinpricks in an endless void. The air grew colder too, a damp, penetrating chill that seeped into my bones, far beyond what natural nightfall could account for. It was a different kind of cold, a wrong cold. A sudden, overwhelming wave of fear washed over me. It was primal, bone deep, unlike anything I had ever experienced. I stood up, my legs trembling, and called out Liam's name, louder this time. "Liam, this isn't funny. Come on." My voice cracked, swallowed by the vastness. I spun around, frantically sweeping my flashlight beam across the clearing, then into the surrounding trees. Nothing. No sign of him, no sound, no flicker of his own flashlight. It was as if the forest had simply swallowed him whole. Panic seized me. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. Had he gone back to scare me? But Liam never took a joke this far. Had he gotten lost? But he knew these woods as well as I did. The thought was absurd. I stood there, frozen, for what felt like an age, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The whispering of the woods seemed to intensify. No longer a gentle murmur, but a chorus of hushed, indecipherable voices. I felt an intense, unsettling sensation, as if the very fabric of the reality around me had shifted. The trees looked subtly different, their shadows deeper, more menacing. The ground beneath my feet felt alien. Finally, a desperate urge to escape took hold. I grabbed the blanket and thermos, leaving the granola bars behind in my haste, and stumbled back onto the path we had taken. I ran, not caring about the roots and branches that snagged at my clothes, the fear propelling me forward. Every shadow seemed to writhe, every rustle of leaves sounded like a pursuing presence. The woods, my sanctuary, had become a terrifying labyrinth. I didn't stop until I burst out of the tree line, gasping for air, the familiar lights of my town a welcome, if distant sight. I ran all the way home, my heart still hammering against my ribs, and collapsed into bed, pulling the covers over my head, trying to erase the image of the empty clearing from my mind. The next morning, I called Liam's house, my voice hoarse. His mom answered, her tone confused. "Liam? He's right here, honey. He's been here all night." My blood ran cold. "No, he wasn't," I stammered. "We were in the woods last night, remember?" He disappeared." There was a pause on the other end. "What are you talking about, sweetie? Liam was home by 9. He said he saw you walking home from the park and decided to head back too. He was here when I went to bed." I felt a dizzying sense of unreality. "No, we went to the woods. We were stargazing. He went to check something out and then he was gone." Liam's mom sounded worried now. "Honey, Liam hasn't been to the woods after dark in years. He's always been too nervous about it. Are you feeling okay? She put Liam on the phone. His voice was calm, normal. Hey, what's up? My mom said you're freaking out about last night. Liam, what are you talking about? I almost screamed. You disappeared. I was waiting for you in the clearing and you just vanished. I ran all the way home. He chuckled, a light, dismissive sound that sent shivers down my spine. What clearing? We didn't go to the woods last night. I went to the park, saw you heading home, and just went back myself. I was home by 9 playing video games. We argued for what felt like hours. I recounted every detail, the thermos, the blanket, the shooting star we almost saw, his mention of a shadow, his decision to check it out. He countered with his version, a quiet evening at home, completely unaware of any woodland excursion. Neither of us could shake our conviction. My phone log showed no calls to him that night, and his showed none from me. It was as if the entire event for him had never happened. Eventually, we stopped talking about it. It was too unsettling, too impossible to reconcile. But the memory is burned into my mind. I still see the empty clearing, feel the wrong cold, hear the intensified whispering of the woods. I still wonder what happened in those few moments when Liam walked into the shadows. Did he step into a different version of that night, just as I felt I had? Did he experience his own terrifying disappearance, only to return to a reality where I was the one who had vanished? I don't go into the whispering woods anymore, not after dark. And sometimes when the wind rustles through the trees, I still hear it, that soft, constant murmur, and I can't help but wonder what secrets the woods are sharing. And if one of them is the truth of that summer night,